Welcome to our 2021 Lecture and Masterclass series. Today we have a conversation with Howie Lindeman, a sound engineer and producer who's had a long and varied career in both live audio and studio production. Welcome, Howie.
Thank you, and thank you everybody for having me on this, as we were just talking a moment ago, and it's still a winter kind of day, especially for you guys. But yeah, thank you very much. I think this is going to be an interesting day for the topics that we'll cover, and that could be from having a fun time, why I did it, to technical questions or answers as we roll along. So I'll kind of go by you hit the ball and I'll try and catch it.
It sounds great. It sounds great. I've got a couple of questions to get us started. And please, anybody that has questions or comments, put them into the YouTube live chat, and I'll be sure to relay them to Howie and get some answers. We're going to cover mostly anecdotal, interesting stuff, and some kind of questions I've got in terms of how the industry actually works out there. But if you have specific technical questions, please do jump in. He's a wealth of information, and I'm sure we can field a couple of those as well.
Great. And especially to your viewers, don't edit your questions, because a real question is a real question, but there's no such thing, as far as I'm concerned, there's no such thing as a stupid question. And you might be going, oh boy, because he has this background or because he does this, is this a silly question? No, we've got to start somewhere. And I think those basic so-called silly or stupid questions are what started this industry of recording and production, because it started with a place of no one knowing what the hell they're doing. And it was so experimental. And I always relate back to that word. That's why they call it engineering, because we're building something. In our world, we're building music, we're building sound. And so, yeah, let's learn how to nail that piece of wood together and go from there.
That's the truth, isn't it? And, no two houses are built exactly the same. So,
right.
It's
and some of them fall down.
That's the truth. That is the truth. We don't like to talk about those.
Right. Okay.
But yeah, it is about those basic skills, right? And having them so cold that you can respond and build the next show, even
absolutely,
though different types of hurdles. Well, tell us about how you got into audio in the first place.
It's a very interesting and broad conversation, and I will say to you, since you're kind of driving this boat, if I get too long, feel free to interrupt me, because the stories and the who's and whys get really, really, really wide. I lost you.
I just hid my picture so that you could be front and center for a little bit.
Oh, okay, no problem. Great. If I go backwards in time, basically back to the days of Woodstock, when I was finishing up high school and the Vietnam War came along, I decided to take a long journey. And this basically leads to where I got into this crazy business of music. And instead of going to Vietnam, I went to Canada. And I stayed in Canada for quite a bunch of years. And when Nixon gave amnesty, which allowed, quote unquote, draft dodgers to come back to the United States without being prosecuted, of course, I came home. But now it leads us to a really big open door of, gee, when I come home, what am I going to do? And I had never planned. I didn't have it in my blood that I knew of to get into music or get into recording or get into production, because I've been an underwater person most of my life. And I was going to study oceanographic veterinarian science. and deal with ocean mammals. But at this point, I couldn't go back to school. So here I am back in New York City, got an apartment for $135 a month rent, which now
doesn't buy you a parking spot now.
Right, absolutely correct. And that was, now it's the cost of lunch. And I picked up the New York Times one afternoon and I saw an ad that said, messenger, music. And my answer basically was, I know how to message and I know what music is. And it said the Wes Farrell Organization at 3 East West 54th Street in Manhattan. So I borrowed a pair of pants from my next door neighbor. She happened to become a very, very famous actress named Jennifer O'Neill at the time, and borrowed a pair of pants, and it was brown corduroys. And I had to put a safety pin on the top button because she was a lot smaller than I was, but I didn't have any nice clothes. And I had a psychedelic tie on and my hair was down to my waist. And it was definitely a picture out of any Cheech and Chong movie, but I still didn't know where I was going. And this is the punchline. So I got on the subway, went downtown, got off at 59th Street, walked down to 54th Street. And I remember standing outside of the building going, oh shit, I'm really in trouble now, because it was the Gucci building. And there I was outside, like I said, looking like it was a scene from a Cheech and Chong movie, and all these people in $10,000 suits coming in and out of the door.
Yeah.
So I went into the building and went upstairs, got out of the elevator to the Wes Farrell Organization, not knowing anything about who Wes was. And when I opened up the doors, those hallways and hallways and hallways of gold and platinum albums. And I was like, who is this person? And as I started to read the labels, it was David Cassidy, it was the Partridge Family, all the stuff that I didn't listen to. And
right.
Yeah, it was really, really different. And every eye in the office was on me, and they asked me, blah, 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 what can we do for you? And I said, I have an appointment with Val Thornton. And she was running the operation for Wes. And Wes Farrell was the publisher, the songwriter for so many of these big, I guess, poppy records.
Yeah, pop bands, right? Like
pop bands,
yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And she came down the hall, and I remember when she walked down the hallway toward me, I heard her heels clicking. And as I looked up, it looked like somebody walking off the cover of Cosmopolitan magazine. And in my brain, I went, I'm really in trouble. And I stood up to introduce myself, and she looked me up and down and said, follow me. She spun around on her heels, marched back down to her office. And as I followed her, every single head at every single desk followed me, going, yep, there's trouble. So to make a long story short, she asked me what I know about being a messenger, et cetera, et cetera. And I was like, well, I guess it's delivering packages. But again, long story short, I ended up delivering packages that were tapes and picking up packages that were tapes from all of the different recording studios in New York City, whether it be Record Plant or at that time, Jerry Ragavoy owned the Hit Factory and Clinton and all these other recording studios. One in particular was a place called Dick Charles, where I met David Thoner. David Thoner went on to be a Grammy winner and recorded and produced so many great, great records. And I met David at Dick Charles, and he was an assistant kind of guy learning at the same time. And I remember they were doing a session with Wolfman Jack. And Charlie, who I think was the engineer and manager of the place, said, come on into the control room. And there I went into the control room. I'd never been inside like a spaceship before. And out on the mic was Wolfman Jack getting ready to do his radio show. And Charlie had said to me, push that button. So I kind of reached forward and pushed a little red button, which happened to be a talkback button. And Charlie spoke to Wolfman, and then Charlie said, let go of the button, and Wolfman spoke, and I was like, oh, cool. That was my first movement on a console.
Yeah.
Now we fast forward the tape. As time goes by, David got a position at the record plant in tape duplication, which is where they started everybody at the record plant, because you had to learn how to make proper tape copies, how to handle tape, and basically what copying was, and making sure the client got a brilliant copy of a master that they could take home or whatever they had to do with it. When David got promoted into being an assistant engineer, he called me to take that position. And so now I'm waiting in the reception area at the record plant. And I remember sitting down in the reception area next to a guy with really long white hair drinking a bottle of Jack Daniels, and it was Johnny Winter. And so there I am, a kid from the street, sitting down next to a guy that I would listen to, asking me if I want a drink. And I was like, no, I can't do that. I'm here for a job interview. And I remember him saying, for what? And I went, I don't know. And he goes, okay, either do I. That's perfect. And we kind of laughed, and it became my turn for my interview with Roy Cicala, who owned the record plant, was also chief engineer. And long conversation talking. Then Roy said something, a couple things that were brilliant. And part of that will work really well for you guys as students to hear, not pay attention to, but at the same time pay attention to. Because Roy said to me, do I know how to align a tape machine? And my answer to him was, what's that? And Roy said, you're hired. And the beauty behind that is they wanted you to learn their way.
Right.
And at that period of time, which was 1975, and that's when I go, holy crap, I do feel old. They taught you their way from the ground up. And that other part of the conversation a moment ago, when I said there's some good things to hear and some not good things to hear, but taking that in stride is real important. And Roy had said years later, if anyone comes in from one of these schools with a diploma in recording or production, tear it up and tell them there are no jobs. Because he wanted you to learn their way. And the recording studios in those days, and a lot of them still that do exist, they would rather you come in green and learn their way. And so now we'll fast forward the tape to you guys who are listening and taking your courses. Learn what you can learn, master everything that you can learn, whether it be the written note or the twist of a knob. But don't think you're a veteran when you graduate. And don't go into a recording studio or into a music library or a band or whatever it might be with an attitude of, oh, I know all this. If you go in with an attitude of wanting to learn and understanding what you've been taught, and all of these courses that are now offered that were never offered in those days, and you can merge all of the information that you have now learned or graduated with, and then be open enough to learn their way, then you'll succeed in this business. And I spent many, many years, I'll kind of rewind the tape and fast forward the tape a little bit as we talk about the beginnings of my time, is going in and treating each client like they're brand new to you. And that way they get to know you, they get to know the studio if they've never been in it. And going way back, one of my most wonderful comments that was said to me during the Jim Croce sessions, and Terry Cashman had said, one of the reasons they love to work with me is that you can eat off the floor. And so now we look at a comment like that, which would make a lot of people go, what? Sure, it had nothing to do, but it does. Yeah. It had nothing to do with my abilities, my knowledge, but it made them feel that room was brand new to them. And making a client feel that way, that it's always clean, always ready. You know what the recording, what the production is going to be all about. And that went right down to during certain periods and certain producers at the record plant, if the eraser on a pencil was dirty, you can get kicked off a session. If there were no points on the pencils, because in those days we used track sheets to chart all of the tracks. And if you took a dirty eraser and erased something, it left a big black smudge on your paper, and that wasn't allowed. It wasn't not necessarily allowed, but it was frowned upon.
Frowned upon, right.
Yeah, exactly. And so all of those little things turned me into who I am today, you know, all these 40 years later, where I would always say to my assistant that I didn't want them sitting in the back of the room just running the tape machine, even though that's what an assistant's gig is, besides setting up microphones in the studio and cleaning and running the tape machine. I'd want them up here at the console with me. And I would always say, I want you to steal my chair. I want you to be able to steal my chair, because when you do, I'll be proud of you, because that means you've learned and you've earned it. So I'm not going to sit here being afraid of you stealing my job. I want you to, because that means you're ready. And I've watched people that have worked with me that have X amount of Grammys behind their name now and working with amazing artists. And they were my assistants. And I never treated anybody less than me. Greg Calby, who now is owner of Sterling Sound Mastering Labs in New York, was one of the first people that I met outside of the reception area at the record plant, which is where I started. And Greg had said to me, if your head gets too fat to walk in the door, stay home. And I never let that metaphor. Yeah, exactly. I never let it go. So that's kind of how I started, delivering and picking up tapes and getting promoted. One of my early sessions at the record plant scared the living crap out of me, because as I got moved out of tape duplication into assisting, I remember going to the board and seeing what I was doing. And one of my early sessions as a nubile assistant engineer, I'm reading the thing up on the board outside of the office, and it said artist. And I looked at the name and I was like, no freaking way. And the name happened to be John Lennon. And I should have been wearing diapers at the point, because I really did feel like pooping my pants because I couldn't believe what I was reading. So now I cry
from the Partridge Family, right?
Right, exactly. And went in and made sure the control room upstairs at record plant was all clean and as ready to go as I knew what to do, because other folks were coming, such as Roy, such as John, such as Jimmy Shoes at the time. That was his nickname. It's Jimmy Iovine, who went on to run Interscope, and now being at Apple all these years later and being the partner with Dr. Dre and creating Beats headphones. He was an assistant engineer also. And then the door of the control room was swung open, and there's a guy standing there named John Lennon. And I remember looking, and I'm being scared crapless, but 2 seconds after he said hi, it was a genuine human being. And I miss him every day since I call his assassination. Yeah. He was a wonderful guy, a talented guy, and just so much fun to be with because of who he is as a person and his brilliance. And I go back to that and I go, those are my roots. So in this crazy world of music and production and engineering, be open, be ready, be open and ready for change. And I don't mean by the week or by the month, I mean by the millisecond, because that's how fast something can change. And your job as you're learning music, and I'll use that word, music, is to have one eye open on what you're doing, one eye open on everything that's happening around you, one ear open for everything that's happening around you, and one ear open on what you're doing. And don't lose contact with any of it, because the moment you lose contact with any of it, you're lost. And then you have to say, what were we doing? Whoops. And don't ever sit there in a control room or in a music class texting somebody instead of doing what you're doing, because then you're lost.
Preach. Absolutely. One thing you didn't in your synopsis mention or highlight is be honest. And that, that was the beginning of the conversation of, I don't even know what that is, right? But that honesty is what does move you forward, because people that have been around the block can see BS, a mile away, and it's the honesty that stands out.
Absolutely correct. It's a funny metaphor, because the people that it would be the people that are listening to you BS have been BSers, so they've already known the game.
Exactly. You mentioned organization in a clean studio. That's great, because it's one of the questions I had that I wanted to ask, and the importance of that organization, but in this type of work, both in terms of the space that you're working in, but also in terms of managing large numbers of inputs and outputs. Yep. In terms of touring and keeping all of those dates and times and lobby calls and all that kind of thing straight, and really any aspect of this work. I mean, we are the original multitaskers, So.
The original, right. You're absolutely correct. And it's a great, great question in regard to, and I call it being a librarian, because if in regard to tape libraries from the old days, and they needed tape such and such, or filing the tapes. And now we fast forward into this world of DAWs and the world of digital domain filing. And you can have hundreds of tracks. You can have hundreds of pieces of information. If you don't keep your files correct, and somebody gets in touch and says, 6 months ago, we worked on such and such, and we want to make a change. You better know where it is, and you better know what they're talking about in regard to their session, because their session is the only session that is important to them. And us as librarians and file keepers is so, so important. And I just recently had that happen with a big band album that I was working on, where nothing was labeled properly. Nothing was individually filed per song. Everything was in one folder. And it took me weeks to decipher and separate per file, per song, because the library side of it was trash. And when you're sitting there all by yourself in your own studio or in someone else's studio, time counts. I still, look at it and I go backwards. Gee, if this was $350 an hour, just like it used to be, all of your crap is in order, because if it's not, it's $350 an hour while you're sitting there trying to untangle somebody's mess. And somebody's going to get really upset that you didn't keep it straight. And they go, hey, Howie, where is? And you go, I don't know. And Roberta Flack said to me once, way back when, and it was great. And she said, when you're having these kind of conversations, and I quote her a lot because she was brilliant in a lot of the things that she would say about listening and doing. And she said, while you're having a conversation with someone, professionally or not, the minute you go, you lost. Right. Now somebody is telling you something important and you go, you aren't paying attention. And so those kind of little comments that have been told to me over the years are brilliant in regard to paying attention, knowing what you're doing, and at some point, complete understanding of what you're doing to a completed project. And then you don't have to go, and it goes back to a simple phrase. You don't need a memory if you tell the truth. It's real simple.
That's a good one. That's the truth too.
So I hope that kind of summed up a little bit of the
absolutely
the library, the keeping track of all your stuff, and Jesus, knowing where your shoes are.
And paying attention, right? And
right.
Being in the moment with people when they're communicating, because that's going to help to be able to file the things in the right way.
Correct.
All of those things. Do you play any instruments yourself?
I spent. Well, that we can rewind, and now as all the years gone by, yes, guitar. For most of my life, even though I haven't played for years and years and years because I'm on this side of the glass. But my very first instrument, I thought, was going to be the vibraphone. Cool. But then I found out it should have been the marimba, because I will never forget the melody from, I think it was the Maxwell House coffee commercial. Way back when. And I thought it was a vibe. So I, as a kid, wanted to learn vibes, but then found out that the melody was done on a marimba and switched to marimba. But what made me change over to a guitar was you couldn't take that thing to the beach.
Right.
It hard
to play a marimba around a campfire, that's for sure.
Right. Exactly. And so I just switched over to guitar and played and have played sessions, et cetera, et cetera. But then as I got busier, and when we use that word busy, when we're talking, and I still, to this day, when people go, oh, I've had such a hard week, did 42 hours. And I go, what? You did 42 hours in a week? Let's try that in a day.
Yeah, right.
And so because of those kind of hours, or 135-hour a week when we were working on Bustin' Loose with Richard Pryor and Cicely Tyson, and Paramount needed a track, and we sat in the studio for 135 hours without closing our eyes, trying, and without leaving the control room except to go to the bathroom. It was 135 hours to get something done. So yeah, the guitar ended up, as it sits right here to my right,
gathering some dust.
Hasn't really been touched. Not only that, I have no more calluses at all.
Yeah, that hurts for sure. Do you think that did playing an instrument help you at all in terms of audio engineering, or was it just a hobby?
Yes, I do. It's real good. Not necessarily important to be a musician, but it's important to understand what a musician is, what a musician does, and it sure as hell helps when somebody goes, can you go to the D section? Or can you go to where the B flat is? Instead of going, what is that? You have knowledge of it. So you have an understanding of notation. You have an understanding of beats, not the headphones, but as in rhythm, and an understanding of melody. So timing, counting, all of that stuff matters. And when it comes down to the engineering and the production side, it outweighs not being able to understand what music is as notation goes. Yeah, so to answer your question in long and short, yeah, the more you know about music, the more you're going to know about engineering and production, because it's all the same thing. It's all about music.
Right. Yep. I agree completely. Can you talk about some other non-audio type skills that have served you throughout your career? Non-specific, things that are specifically, yeah.
Sure. And it's funny you say that, because my understanding of what I ended up doing for a living, and not necessarily why, because I've explained that, why I did it. I needed a job. But part of what gave me a broader vision of what I do, believe it or not, was the underwater world. Been a scuba diver since I've been a kid, been an instructor most of my life. And that expanse of the ocean, the expanse of the big blue underwater in an ocean, it gave me a different vision of life. And it gave me an understanding of what you're hearing in a 360-degree plane underwater. Changed the way I listen in the stereo world, in the left and right, or left and right rear. But I understood sonically what was going on in a, not necessarily a spiritual, but at the same time a spiritual space, because of how the underwater world made me listen. And I found myself listening to fish, listening to whales when I was in those kind of waters, like in Hawaii, listening to the crustaceans, whether they were shrimp or crabs or other mollusks that would click or crackle. And you started paying attention to these amazing little creatures and realizing, yeah, they're making sound or talking to each other just like we do. And I found myself being super duper quiet when I was underwater. In fact, there were places in the Caribbean and Hawaii too, where I would just find myself a little place on the bottom. I would never touch coral or sit on coral because you kill it, but I would find myself a little sandy spot and I would just settle down instead of racing around the reef, and found myself a little place to sit down and let the critters come to me, because I no longer felt like the hunter. So they would come to inspect me. And it was quite beautiful when big critters, whether it be big sharks or mammals or little tiny guys, would come to say hello to you because you no longer felt like danger. And you'd start to hear things. And so, yeah, the underwater world changed my vision of how I listen to things and how deep I can listen. And people have said to me about my mixes, and it's funny when I said a moment ago that 360-degree world of sound underwater, people have said to me about my mixes that not only do I portray a left and right within my mix, but I display a top to bottom, not frequency wise, but top to bottom and a front to back vision of what you're hearing, and give that 360-degree openness and spatial quality within that. And I owe that to the underwater world and how I listened and paid attention to what was going on around me at all times underwater. And yeah, so to answer that question, yeah, my underwater life added to what I do now for my 45-year plus career of mine.
We don't have to count.
Very true.
That's a great answer, Howie, and really fascinating, because I also see that it maybe has kind of centered your point of how you relate to others, that kind of sit back and let people come to you in a way, or
right.
not be not be a threat, and that really opens up the possibility for relationships and for learning and for teaching,
It's very, 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 very true. Exactly what you said. It's a come to me, but I'll go to you. And I've always said to people, send me something if you want me to listen to it, which will open up a whole, another topic for your students and your listeners to be able to reach out to me and not hesitate to say, would I listen? Would I give you an opinion? Can I help? Sure, that's what I'm here for. And I come from those days of no holds barred when it comes to honesty. And when it comes to honesty about somebody's record or somebody's song, if I don't like it, I'm going to tell you, because otherwise I'm lying to you and I'm lying to me and just doing it for the possibility of making some money. So I always tell somebody, if they have a project, send me a piece of it, send me something so I can explore it, to one, see if it interests me, two, if I simply like it and go, yeah, okay, great, let's go from there. So to your students, to your viewers, yeah, reach out to me. You could find me on Facebook. You can just find me email wise, and we'll trade that information later. And you never know what relationships can be formed, what business relationships can be formed, all with that simple word, being honest.
100%. I mean, we're proof in the pudding here. I think we've known each other close to 15 years because of a gig, and it's just
because of a gig, exactly. Right.
It's amazing how that works, which is a perfect segue into my next question. Can you talk about the importance of networking in live production in general? I mean, production, studio live. The lines have certainly blurred over the years, but
right.
The importance of networking with, folks that you're working with locally, folks that you work with on a daily basis on the road, or, just in general, it goes so far sometimes.
And it goes so far. That's a great question, and a great screw up of mine in the early years. Now that we have mobile devices, whether it be iPhones or Androids, and we have thousands of phone numbers. And what I found in my early days is that I would align myself with other engineers, which is really, really good. But the engineers that you align yourself with are looking for the same job you are.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't go outside of that circle, you're basically cutting yourself off in that world of networking. So if we look at the world of Facebook, if we look at the world of Twitter, if we look at Instagram, or whatever, even an envelope with a stamp on it with a letter inside, get names. Yeah, right. What's that? Exactly. And that's a whole other topic. If the networking that you want or the networking you should have doesn't materialize, how are you going to find work? Unless you get a regular job where they then give you jobs. And in this world of music, you're as good as you are, but you're even better for the people that you know. And an old statement is you're only as good as the people you put around you really, really does mean something, because you could always stay in contact. You can always say hi. And I do that on a weekly basis. I just randomly call people that I've been affiliated with for a bazillion years. And I go, hey, how are you? Regardless of this COVID situation. But that also gives me reason to go, hey, are you okay? How are you doing? And made these contacts. And just like you said a moment ago, here we have X amount of years behind us. And here we are Zooming to each other and other people because of a connection we made and a connection that we didn't let die. And so when it comes to networking, Yeah, you can move that onto your top of the list that goes along with the other things on the top of the list,
Right.
because they all should be at the top of the list. And that is, yes, take numbers, take contacts, don't lose them. And now that you have 10,800 numbers in your phone, use them. Don't let them sit there and be afraid to use them. If you use them, you'll know if you're abusing them, because somebody will tell you, stop calling my ass. But a whole lot of people will be, hey, it's really nice to hear from you. And you move into their frontal lobes and your name comes up. So yeah, network, network, network. Throw out the hook with the bait on it. Throw out a bear trap, whatever you got to do to create that network without being obnoxious is a real important thing. And align yourself with people like what I didn't do in the beginning, and align yourself with the people that have the opportunity to bring you into something, whether it be a live production, a live show, a recording, a mix. They're in a situation of going, oh, I have this project. Would you want to? Instead of somebody going, oh, I want that too. And you both become in the competition mode. Network is such an important word. If you visualize a fishing net, and we look at the fishing net as one big catching thing. But if we explore the fishing net even closer, and we look at every little line that is interconnected with every other little line to a knot that connects the next little line, that then forms this big giant fish net, that's networking, because every single knot is connected to somebody else. And that somebody is connected to somebody. And somewhere along the line, it can lead back to you. So let that book grow and let that list become gigantic, but use it. Don't let it become dormant.
Great advice. Great advice. What are a couple of the highlights of your career? I mean, you've worked with so many folks. It's got to be hard to pick a couple of highlights, to be honest. But I mean, John Lennon, that's obviously got to be towards the top of the list for sure. And you know, becoming friends with him. But what is at the top of your list when you look back? When
I look back, yes, of course, John Lennon, him as a person, him as a musician, which was the Walls and Bridges album. And I remember something John said to me, and it was quite beautiful at the same time perplexing, because when Walls and Bridges came out, I remember looking at the credits, and on the credits, it said Howie as an assistant engineer. And I remember directly, and I was up at John's apartment and at the Dakota in New York City, and we were talking about it and sitting on the couch and playing guitar, and I was playing his black and white Rickenbacker. And I had said, did you forget my last name? Because it only said Howie. And he kind of, in a very, very subtle chuckle, went, no, I didn't forget your last name, because there's only one Howie. And it was such a beautiful statement, and it literally shut me up.
Yeah.
And so that period of time of the early part of my career and getting to work with such a beautiful human being. And I remember when he got murdered, I had just gotten off a plane in Australia, landing in Australia. I was going on tour with Roberta Flack and found out that he got killed. And there literally isn't much time that rolls by on any day that I don't think about the man as that period of time and that record. And then we move on to another highlight in my career where my whole last name, first and last name, is on it. And that was another beautiful, groundbreaking record that I was an assistant on and got to engineer a little bit, which was Stevie Wonder's Songs in the Key of Life. And
I don't know if any of our folks will know that album.
Right. breaks.
Yeah, people.
Right. And so that kind of thing, and God, all Three Dog Night stuff, and I mean, on in the Bat Out of Hell album with Meatloaf. I mean, the list is quite amazing. Tim Curry's I Do the Rock, and there Tim Curry went on to, be an actor and being a great actor and a great part in The Hunt for Red October. But the album I Do the Rock was brilliant, and the reason he named it that was even crazier, because we did The Rock, and he would always bring this beautiful brand new rock of cocaine in and put it on the producer's desk, and it was always there for our usage.
Sure.
And there was the name of the album, I Do the Rock, and that's why we named it that.
My gosh. That does explain the 5-day straight sessions, I guess.
Right, exactly. And even though it was a rock and roll record, but that was kind of the undernote.
Of course.
And then we look at that, the records that I've been involved with, like I said earlier, Jim Croce and all the big Roberta Flack records, and on and on and on. But then we move over to the live realm. And what was interesting is I became a crossover guy by accident, because most people in this industry are either recording engineers, quote unquote, mix engineers, or mastering engineers, or live sound engineers, where luckily in my life, I do both. And I owe that to Roberta Flack, again, from my early days, where I remember Roberta saying, after we did record after record after record after record, she said to me, I want to take you on the road to make my show sound like the record.
Wow. And in that day and age, that was saying something.
And that was saying something. And right now, to this day and age, I will mix my live shows as if I was sitting in a studio, and my audience just happens to be between me and the artist. And I would treat it the same way, and I would mix it the same way. I wouldn't just mix it where the keyboards were on stage left, which is house right, and that's where I would put them in the mix. No, I still mix my show as if I mix a record. And people would always say, it sounds like a bloody record. And I go, it is. The only difference is there's an audience.
Instead of a tape machine.
Treat it exactly the same way. And then years with Natalie Cole, who was absolutely brilliant and just perfection when it comes to performance and style and things of the sort. So when we look at what do I do, what are the highlights? Yeah, I guess the highlights of my career, as funny as this will sound, are all of them. Because
good answer.
I treated everybody equal, as exciting as some were and some weren't. They all got treated with respect. They all got treated in a different manner by me, especially in the live world, because you'll still hear people, whether it be production managers or tour managers or folks in general, that will say something to the effect of, don't talk to the band. Don't talk to the artist. And I'm like, that's really wrong. Not only do I talk to the band, talk to the artist, I want to get to know them so I know their personality. So if somebody says my guitar sounds a little bit too green, I'll know what they mean because I've gotten to know the person and understand those intricacies that makes an artist who they are. And that way I can portray it. And sure, you might not be hanging out with them 24/7, but saying hello so they know who you are. And they then trust you as another part of the band, whether it be in the studio or whether it be live, that you're putting their trust in your hands and in your ears for everything that's happening in the studio or on a stage. And that brings me to a rewind, kind of a point about studio recording, if I may make a left in this conversation. Is that okay?
Sure, of course.
And that is when I just said what I said about getting to know the artist and saying hello, and the band and members and the team, and understanding who they are and why they might not like corduroy, and all these weird little intricacies that makes a human being human. It's the same as the studio. And I've said it to many. When was the last time that you, sitting behind the console, got your ass up and went out into the studio and sat there and listened to the band, listened to the singer, not in the control room, out in the room, so you could hear what the drums sound like? I'm not talking about all of the samples and blah, blah, blah that are used now. I'm talking about a guitar player sitting there playing for a part. Are you listening to the amp? Are you listening to the sound of the guitar? Or are you listening to the singer sing on that microphone out in the room, so you can feel them, they can feel you, before you go back into the control room and end up making their guitar sound like an accordion because you never listened to the guitar? Mm-hmm. Those little bits of getting to know you are so important in making you who you are as a musician, as a producer, as an engineer, or a video editor, whatever it is. You got to get to know the people that are giving you the project, which could be their life song. And if you don't care what their middle name is, then you don't care what the middle of the project is.
That is some solid truth there. And I really like that advice of listening to what the artist is hearing in their own space, whether that's a stage or a studio. I think that's really important. You can, sit there and queue up your monitor mixes and listen in your cans to the signal input. But if you don't go up and actually walk around the stage for a minute while they're rehearsing, you don't actually know what that stage sounds like.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
It's important to say, oh, wow, there's like some phasing happening here or something like that. Yeah. And that's why they can't hear their monitor mix. And so now I know how I can fix that, But yeah, if you stand 150 feet out in the house and think you know everything, then
right.
you're not going to have a job very long.
It's very true. And we look at stuff like on a tour in the world of the live domain and live mixing. You as the front of house engineer, the front of house is not that one seat. If you're in a 30,000 seat arena or a stadium, while the band is playing or while you're doing your sound check, you need to walk the entire parameter of your stadium, of your arena, of your theater, and make sure that it's heard from all of the seats that you can envision. And sometimes the walk is giant. And a friend of mine who does a bunch of live mixing for a comedian, he said it extremely valuable one day when we were talking about this. He goes, if that one seat in that arena doesn't hear his joke, you're in trouble. Mm-hmm. And we can take that down to the tambourine. We can take that down to a shaker. We can take that down to a Marshall stack, screaming. Everybody in those seats paid for a ticket to be entertained. If they're not hearing something properly, it's your fault.
That is it. Every seat. You don't know if that tambourine player's mother is sitting in that far back seat, and boy, is she gonna raise holy hell if she can't hear her son, right?
Absolutely correct.
But that's
Absolutely
it.
Correct.
And not
our
getting
job
too
is to be part of the band.
Yeah. Yep, and it's a job, right?
Right.
No matter how long you do it, how good you get at it, it's still work every day, and that involves, getting up out of your seat and checking it around, not, like you said, not being in the back of the room on your phone.
Right.
There's always something that can be worked on. I don't care if it's the tone of the tambourine or what, you can always tweak it a little bit more.
There was somebody that said to me, oh, I don't know when, I don't even know what it was about or what the session or show was, but somebody said to me, you never leave those faders alone, do you? And I went, no, I don't. That's why it's called mixing.
Right. Yeah. Yep. You might get to a space that's a pretty comfortable place, but there's never a time to take your hands off. That is
right.
True.
I remember seeing a show in Clearwater that will kind of go unmentioned for a moment, but she is an amazing artist, and it was at Coachman Park in Clearwater, and it happened to be a Norah Jones show.
Oh, okay.
And so it will go unmentioned for a moment, but I remember her guitar player playing a beautiful solo on an acoustic guitar, and it was totally inaudible. And this is a long time ago, many years. And it was not audible. And I remember being, and very rarely, because being in the audience is someplace that I'm not to be as a spectator, because I'm always working.
Sure.
But I remember turning and looking to where front of house was. And now I realize why I wasn't hearing that guitar. And it was because the front of house guy, and I don't know if it was hers or sound company guy or not, but he was busy talking to a girl while a solo was going on.
Yep.
And that doesn't work.
Nope. But it's something that both of us have seen a number of times, probably. It is definitely not that uncommon, but it definitely should not happen. That
brings us to a real good quick point.
Sure.
And as my career grew, and especially with some of the artists that let me pull something out of the screen. I always ask for bicycle racks, gates around front of house, and I ask for security. So while you're mixing, you don't get audience members coming up to you and wanting to talk or wanting to know what that does while a show is going. I don't mind somebody talking to me a little bit if I invite them in or let security know, let them in while sound check or something of sort is going on, but dare not the show. I don't want to be bothered. I don't want people talking to me because I'm busy and I'm getting paid to be busy by the people that are on that stage.
That's right. This hour just flew by, Howie. We have one question I do want to get to here.
Are you saying we've been on an hour already?
Can you believe it? I know.
Okay, I'm going to bring up a real important subject since the hour is zipping.
Yeah.
For your people, write in, mail in, call in. Let's do this again, because I think this is fun, but at the same time informative. And I hope for all of you guys, it feels that way. And if I'm allowed to say this, reach out to me. You can find me on Facebook, but it's listed funny. It's Howie Lindeman. And reason being is at some point somebody stole my name to try to reach out to a lot of the artists that I work with. So I had to change it. So now it's Howie Lindeman. And you can find me on Facebook or howardlindeman@gmail.com. Reach out to me. We can all grow together. And let's do this again. If all you guys would like it, let Tim know and we'll do it again, because we'll get to know each other. Real simple.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm going to try to get you up here in the fall in person here to do a little intensive with the kids in the studio.
That'd be fabulous.
We got one quick question that we'll try to address here in the last couple minutes. Ben was interested in how you can create that kind of space within a stereo mix when you were talking about the three-dimensional, 360-degree soundscape. If you're just working with a stereo mix, how can you get a pan to be more three-dimensional than?
All right, great. Excellent. Was that from Ben?
Ben, yeah.
Okay. Ben, the question is great. The answer is great. Magic.
More next time.
And that magic comes from two important places. It comes from the part that is being played or sung, and the space that the played note or the song that is being sung, the space around it adds to that. And then how you find a place for it, not only EQ wise, not only compression wise, not only reverb or delay wise, but before you start putting all of that junk in front of that space that you're trying to create, listen to it, find where it is. There's lots of occasions where when I do a vocal or when I do a guitar, or for that matter, drums, I'll set up room mics. And you go, wow, room mics for a vocal? Sure, because there's a room around the singer. And it's not necessarily recorded on the same track, but it's recorded on another track or two tracks while, let's just say, somebody's singing. And now you can find a place to create that room sound in your mix and find yourself with those other dimensions, because when we speak to somebody, we're not basically coming in here and talking like this right into your ear. No, we're kind of way back here and we start to hear the room. And it's the same way with a microphone. If we don't capture what's around it, it's here. And it has the depth that it allows you to have, but that spatial quality is not there. But you can always add it later. And part of that finesse of spatial quality, who says that you can't pump your vocal or pump your guitar or your drums to a set of speakers and stereo mic the room that you're working in, even though the band is not there? And now you're recreating a room sound, and you're recreating an ambience around something that might have sounded just flat and non-dimensional. And use your imagination. That's why I use that word magic for you, Ben. Use your imagination to wherever you can take it, because there is no such thing as I can't or why. Try it. If it doesn't work, you'll know. If it works, you'll know. And we can get to where now, on all those little black boxes and all those little plugins, we can go to a real simple analogy real quick. I can talk for hours about this. That's why when we just said I'll come up or we'll do another one, because I want to touch on these subjects over and over and over again. Where did the preset tiled room come from on so many little devices where you punch tiled room? Well, gee whiz, in the early days, you didn't have anything to punch in. So a tiled room is a bathroom. And we would put a speaker in a bathroom and a microphone and send a guitar or something out to that speaker in the tiled room and record it from that microphone, tiled room, etc., etc. So experiment until you start to giggle because you found something so cool. There was an engineer I worked with. We were doing a vocal and he wanted to do something really different. And he did. And it was freaking great. And he got a bucket and he tore up hundreds of little shreds of tinfoil and put it in the bucket and put a pipe into the bucket, and we mic'd it and had the singer sing into this pipe, and it excited all of the tinfoil that was in the bottom of the bucket. And it almost was like an electronic vibrato that we used behind a vocal. And it's like, do it.
Oh, that's a good one. Wow.
I can take it to one other level, and I don't mind it sounding where people are going to go and sit back in their chairs, but it shows you where. Do I have a few more minutes?
Yep, we got a few more. One more question, and we'll try to get out of here in the next 8 minutes or so for anybody.
Or next 8 hours. Depends on how we want to do it. There was a band. This is crazy. So be ready for it, ladies and gentlemen. And please don't be offended by it. Let your mind go to the sound, not the situation, even though the situation is equally as nuts as how beautiful the sound was. And it was a band from Canada, and they were looking for a different percussion sound. Let your mind start to wander. And all of a sudden, the drummer said, to his girlfriend, So they went out to the studio and were in the control room and were watching her get undressed. And now she continued to get undressed. And now she was totally naked. So your mind can start to wander. Yes, he had her lay down on the piano bench, asked for a long, thin microphone, which we then put saran wrap around, and he then inserted this microphone into his girlfriend and played the percussion stuff on her rib cage. And it sounded freaking amazing. So we take that word of imagination and say no holds barred. That's how you, Ben, can find that magic. Because if you don't think it can be done, you're wrong. Whatever your mind can come up with, as long as someone doesn't get hurt, as long as things don't get broken. But with the world of experimentation, how did we learn how to fly without crashing our flying machines first? And so here was this internal percussion track, and she got credit for it on the record.
That's a wild story. One last question, and then we'll take a break here. The question is, what is the best way to try and create the sound from an album in live sound? That's a tough one to answer quickly, but
real quick, it would be naturally the band, sure, the parts the band is playing, but your microphone choice and what Ben was talking about, your spatial quality and where you place things in your stereo image, closeness or distance of microphones to drum heads, to guitars, to vocals, all of that. You want to listen to a record. If you get booked, let's just say you got booked by Band A to do their live tour or a live show. Your job is to listen to the record. Listen to the record to find out what the record is about so you can then portray it. Because I remember hanging out at the Fillmore East in New York City, whether it be Janis Joplin and a Hendrix Day or a Foghat Day or whatever. And some of the things as a kid, I would say, gee whiz, how come it doesn't sound like the record? And all these years later, I'm allowed to make my show sound like the record that I did. And if I didn't do the record, I would sure damn listen to the record so I would know what I'm walking into.
Excellent advice. Howie, I cannot thank you so much. Really amazing to see you. You look fantastic.
Back in. And really, to all of you guys that are listening, again, you could reach out, Tim, and say, hey, we want to contact. Don't feel like what we said earlier on, don't feel like you're bugging me. Don't feel like you have a stupid question because there's no such thing. Reach out. I'm here for you. because I came from this spot at one time and wanted to know how. So don't hesitate to go, hey, we just want to say hi, or hey, how do you help me? And I will.
Thank you so much. And yes, if anybody needs to get in touch with Howie or wants to, let me know, and I will gladly pass along his contact information. I definitely recommend it.
Great.
All right. Well, thanks again, Howie. We'll talk to you soon. Take care, and let's look at the fall and get you up here for a couple of days.
Absolutely. Anytime. I'd love it. And let's make the snow go away for a little while.
Yeah.
We'll chat some more. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Hey, have a great day.
All right,
thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.